Mummy on the Orient Express is one of my favourite episodes of Capaldi's era, and it's written by one of my favourite side writers for the show, Jamie Matheson. Matheson contributed to some of the best episodes of the last decade, along with having some of the best from Series 8 and Series 10. And today, we look at his first work of genius. Oh! And I never thought this story would actually exist, since the last time the Orient Express was mentioned was in the Big Bang way back in 2010, 4 years before this story came to exist. Was it worth waiting 4 years and getting a new Doctor and companion for this story? Let's find out. This episode's opening, like most of Series 8's opening, is absolutely fantastic, establishing the threat of the episode extremely well, and showing us one of the main characters we'll follow throughout. And I love how this opening already sets up an unnatural feel to the episode, with the flashes of the items and the timer in the bottom left. This timer is used to great effect as it causes loads of tension and adds loads of suspense to the scenes with it in. And having a threat that only one person can see at a time, I think is really interesting and cool. I never noticed until writing these reviews that practically every episode of Series 8 starts well. Even Kill the Moon. When we arrive back on the train, we get some fantastic dialogue from 12 and Clara showing Matheson already knows how to write for both characters really well, and establishing that there's still some awkward tension between the two since the ending of Kill the Moon. And this is clearly the first time they are seeing each other for a while. Also, this is apparently going to be their last adventure. Obviously it isn't, but we'll talk about that later.
You'll be able to see the soaring majesty of the Magellan Black Hole.
Does anyone else that the train narrator voice sounds a lot like Max Capricorn?
Off-world accounts to retire me to the beaches of Penhaxico too, where the ladies, so I'm told, are very fond of metal.
I don't know whether this was intentional or not because both episodes take place in space recreation of Earth events, but if this was intentional, that's a really good reference that I never noticed before. Then we get one of my favourite scenes for 12 and Clara in Series 8, and that is some steep competition. And I love how at the beginning we see the tactic that some of the gods have used in the past of trying to talk over someone, or trying to brush something off when someone makes a good point, about something that they just don't want to talk about. We see the Sim Master do this in Last of the Time Lords in the End of Time Part 1. We see Jack do it a lot in Torchwood when his past is mentioned, and he does it in Utopia. And we see the 10th Doctor do it when Martha goes to leave. It's used very effectively here, as we know that 12 doesn't like showing emotions and being confronted with them just makes him uncomfortable. And, as per usual, Capaldi's performance is brilliant. He doesn't even need to say a word and we can tell exactly what he's thinking, and what it means to him. It's one of my favourite things about Series 8 12. These subtle moments of character acting from Capaldi add so much more depth to his character in this series. Then we see the Karen from before bully the Doctor for some reason, and she gets escorted off, informing our main characters about the threat that's on board, and the Doctor gets in a great line when they're walking to their rooms.
It might be nothing, old ladies die all the time, it's practically their job description. Clara, you actually sound as if you want this to be a thing, do you?
No, look.
It also establishes Clara's obsession well, with her actually being the one more interested in the danger. And it's usually the other way around, but I'll talk more about the obsession later in a rant. I really like the conversation with Clara and Danny on the phone. As per usual, Danny's being the more logical one out of the two when it comes to the Doctor, because ignoring Danny's one terrible scene in The Caretaker, he's actually fine with the two travelling together as long as she's safe, which I think is fair. The only thing I don't like about this is Clara constantly lying to Danny about it instead of just telling him she wants to keep travelling, because it's annoying as fuck and just makes her look bad. Then, we get introduced to one of the greatest side characters ever, Perkins. I absolutely adore this character, and honestly wouldn't complain if he was brought back. Jamie Matheson is really good at making one-time characters likeable, something the show struggles with extremely now. But Perkins is one of my favourites of these, as he could have easily been a companion. And I like that for once, the Doctor doesn't just instantly get along with the people that he meets. When the two meet, they are both suspicious of each other, but once they find out they have the common interest of finding out what's going on, they work together. And even when they work together, there's still some moments where Perkins challenges the Doctor's beliefs and views. and vice versa, and I really enjoyed that about these two on screen together. Their chemistry's great. After a quick scene where Maisie pulls a Jack Harkness,
or you could do that because that works too.
we see the Doctor try and investigate, where he talks to this character Emil Morehouse so we can find out more about the mummy. And I love how at the beginning we see how impatient the Doctor is with finding out the information. It's very comedic and it makes 12 stand out a lot. And the Doctor giving him a jelly baby was also very funny, and then this starts the two events running alongside each other. We see another victim get locked onto by the mummy, while we find out more about it. And this scene's editing makes it feel a lot more impactful than the first death. After two back-to-back brilliant scenes, one about difficult people and the other being a comedic use of the psychic paper,
I'm your worst nightmare.
A mystery shopper. Oh, great.
Really? That's your worst?
we get an interesting conversation between the Sergeant and the Doctor, which I really like, because it adds more depth to the Sergeant before he's killed off later. And to cap off that scene, we get more fantastic chemistry between 12 and Perkins. Then Matheson does what Matheson does best, make the Doctor effectively powerless as his gadgets are useless or taken away. And we see in this situation that the Sonic is useless, and the TARDIS is shielded off so that no one can get to it. After some very obvious ADR, we see the third victim get picked off, and the Captain decides to let the Doctor do his magic. He then figures out why everyone's there, and the scientist we were talking to earlier starts seeing the mummy. This is a fantastic showcase of the 12th Doctor, showing that he's willing to let people die if it means it can help him save others. And the factor of death won't get in his way, and this is a brilliant dark direction for the Doctor. And we get a scene later on where Perkins calls him out for it. Then, the Doctor finds out, thanks to the Sergeant, that the computer, Gus, is picking people off based on their health, and that the Sergeant will be next up. Speaking of the Sergeant, his death scene is fantastic, and this time I think it's a lot more interesting, as his performance peaks here, and he's a lot more aggressive than the others are. And while he is aggressive, he's still being helpful, and his last sentence is thanking the Doctor for waking him up, which was a fantastic scene. And as if the scene couldn't get any better, we get the Doctor being challenged by Perkins that I mentioned earlier, being shown the best here, and then they almost figure out what's happening and why. When the Doctor calls Clara, we get a really interesting moral struggle where the Doctor tells her to bring Maisie to the room with all the scientists so her death isn't a waste. While it's later revealed that he wasn't fully telling the truth because he had to trick the computer, this was still a really good moral struggle. Because while the Doctor is being cold and distant, logically, he's right about it, and that's why it's such a good moral issue. You come to appreciate little moments like that a lot more when you have to suffer through Kill the Moon again. Even Perkins is shocked by how distant this comes off as. When the mummy appears in front of Maisie, we get one of the greatest Capaldi scenes, and his theme plays perfectly here, making it so much more impactful and brave, and I love it. It fits the scene perfectly. And this scene in itself is absolutely fantastic. The Doctor is risking his life to find out more things. And he's still being comedic and engaging at the same time. And he saves it at the very last second. Fucking fantastic! And then after that we get some dialogue from 12, admitting he didn't know who he could save and who he couldn't. And then we get one of the best lines ever.
Sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones. But you still have to choose.
That is fucking excellent and shows how the Doctor's morals stand perfectly. And it makes 12 a very sympathetic character, despite all of his flaws. And I adore the scene where the Doctor offers Perkins to travel with him. It's a really heartfelt moment, and it's very subtle for both these characters. Bring back Perkins, man, come on, he's actually such a great character. And then, after my favourite one-time character ever leaves, we get a scene that I absolutely adore but I have some issues with as well. So, Clara decides that she can't give up her addiction to the Doctor, and I like this because it leads into Clara's arc of being obsessive and wanting to be like the Doctor. More on that in this video. And I also like how we see some subtle manipulation from the Doctor, as we can see that he can clearly hear what's being said, but he acts as if he doesn't. My problem with this is that it starts with Clara lying to Danny again! There's just no need for it. It's so annoying and it makes Clara look bad. Unnecessary lying like this is what got Clara the bad reputation she has. At least the music is really good and it is a very good cap off to this brilliant episode. But still. So, that was Mummy on the Orient Express, and what do I even have to say? It's Jamie Matheson! There's not really many other writers like this genius who can handle and make so many characters so expertly and likeable and enjoyable to watch. He can do an absolutely fantastic mystery and can make almost everything interesting and fucking brilliant to watch. So basically, he's Toby Whithouse with a less tarnished track record. If you're wondering what the showrunner list looks like, it should be this. Toby first, if not Toby then Neil Gaiman, and if not Neil Gaiman then Jamie Matheson. If you're wondering why it's like this, considering I praise Whithouse loads and Matheson, after rewatching The Doctor's Wife and realising a lot of the potential it has was squandered by the budget, I think Neil Gaiman could definitely be the most impressive with today's budget, and Toby speaks for himself, and Matheson also does. And because Series 8 is one of the best series of the show, despite the BBC hating anything remotely positive being said about it, considering they blocked my listen review so many times! But this series gave us Matheson back to back. Genius! Up next is Flatline.
Don't forget to click below and subscribe to the official TARDIS Team YouTube channel.